In part 1 of this series, Keeping Families Connected, we looked at how affordable two-way radios that are relatively simple to operate can be used to connect families in the midst of a global disaster and beyond. In this part of the series, Keeping Communities Connected, we'll focus on the evolving needs of families and friends as they join with like-minded others for greater security. In August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall on the Gulf Coast, and New Orleans was hard hit. But so were other areas along the Gulf Coast. The result was a wide-ranging catastrophic failure of power grids and centralized infrastructure, including broadcast media, telephone, and cellular services, leaving survivors completely isolated and in the dark. In response, ham radio operators from across the USA loaded their trucks and RVs with radios, fuel, and supplies, and drove at their own expense and risk into the grief-stricken areas to provide two-way communications with relief agencies and local municipalities, and to relay health and status messages from local survivors to their friends and families outside of the affected regions. This begs the obvious question for those who are leery of investing in two-way communications equipment and training. Given that ham radio operators are very willing to help survivors as they did in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, why bother? Someone else will do it. Well, here is the answer. Hurricane Katrina was a regional disaster. It was not a national or a global disaster in scope. However, assuming it had been, those hams who volunteered their services in the Katrina disaster areas would not have shown up because of the pressing survival needs of their own local communities. Ergo, for those in the Katrina disaster, the only help would have been the best of intentions, and perhaps the ability to transmit a few messages between grief-stricken family members. That is, assuming survivors could find enough ham radio operators in the grief-stricken areas with enough equipment and power to send and receive messages over the air. Likewise, a disaster of this magnitude would quickly outstrip the resources of state and federal governments. Or in other words, will you do nothing except to wait for trucks loaded with water and supplies to show up? If so, the odds are they will not do so in a global disaster. Consequently, this puts a whole new light on the popular shelter-in-place strategy. In a global disaster, it will no longer have meaning. While we're at it, what else will no longer have meaning? Smartphone apps. You may be wondering, instead of the expense and bother of using two-way radios for survival, is there a smartphone app you can download for global disasters? Such an app would cost so much less and be infinitely easier to use. Assuming such an app existed, what would it be? How about Disappster for iPhone, Android, and Buck Rogers decoder rings? Here are the features. Free until you need it to work. Nowhere to really buy it. Easy to use because you're talking to yourself. The light version features a basic false sense of security, but the Pro version not only includes the light version, you also get Hysteria Maximizer. Sure, we're being a bit comical here, but isn't it just as comical to think that there is an easy solution, like a downloadable smartphone app, or government trucks that will show up with unlimited supplies of blankets, medicine, hot sandwiches, and bottled water? The point here is that in the event of a global disaster, we can all expect to be pretty much on our own. This means that we'll need to gather with like-minded others to scavenge what we can so that we can move to a more livable setting in a less affected area. This means that you will need to up your strategy from Level 1 emergency radio system, as discussed in the first part of this series, to the Level 2 mobile field operations level with its more sophisticated amateur two-way radios. This is how you will help to keep your survival community connected in a way that is as safe as possible. To help you expand on this broader view of the first two levels of this strategy, we invite you to watch our three-part series, Post-Disaster Communications. You'll see how to adapt to new communication needs with a range of different two-way radios as you begin to gather together with other like-minded survivors. Then in the third and final part of this series, creating a post-disaster global alternate, you will learn why two-way radios will play a crucial role in bringing about an enlightened future for survivors. A Star Trek future, if you will. Until the next time, remember this. Radio Free Earth will pay for itself many times over with your initial radio purchases. And the sooner you begin, the more you'll save. To purchase our book, Radio Free Earth, online, visit amazon.radiofreeearth.org. We offer 3 different editions, a low-cost black and white edition and 2 collector-grade all-color special editions. For the Radio Free Earth team, this is Marshall Masters, and if things go sideways, we'll catch you on the 40.